Hello and welcome to the 1871 podcast with Dylan Kerr, Johnny Hunt and me, Mark Roach. And our special guest tonight is former Royals defender Andy Bernal, who joins us all the way from Canberra in Australia, where it's already tomorrow morning. So hello Andy, how are you?
Hello, thank you for having us on the show. I've been watching all the other podcasts with interest, and you guys are doing great. So it's a pleasure to be here, and let's chat.
Yeah, well, before we speak to you, Andy, a heads up for you, the listeners, that we've got a special episode coming up on Sunday when I'll be chatting to Graham Nicholas, who has reported on Reading for local and national media for nearly 50 years. So that's available anytime from 10 a.m. on Sunday. And then our special guest on Tuesday evening is Martin Allen. And we have a special episode coming up in 2 weeks when we'll be discussing and choosing our greatest Reading 11 from the last 50 years. So Dylan, of course, already wants to know if he's in it, but we'll have to wait and see. So look, no game for Reading this weekend, but there has been a new signing this week from Crewe, Terrell Thomas, a centre-back. Now, I have it on very good authority that Crewe didn't want to keep him. So Johnny, your thoughts? Paul Ince obviously feels it was something that was worth doing, having another centre-back. What are your thoughts?
I think it's just backup, isn't it? I think we're down to 12 players now because of the international break. Who knows what's going to happen in the next few weeks? Got a point to prove, so look, give him a chance. Hungry young player out, give himself a go. Nothing to lose. It's a no-brainer, isn't it? Obviously, if it doesn't break our financial restrictions, then we'll be fine. So, we've had a good couple of results recently, so we'll see what happens, and we can enjoy the international break.
Yeah, and it's the big game coming up at Barnsley next weekend. And Dylan, there's already a decent gap between Reading and Barnsley. So if Reading can get a win at Barnsley next weekend, that's a massive step towards championship safety, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big game for Reading, especially on the back of the victory last week. So, the onus now is to go to Barnsley, and it's always a tough place, Oakwell. And Barnsley have turned the corner, so they'll be expecting to get 3 points as well. But it's what team wants it most at the end of the day when you go away from home. Can you get a point? If not, can you sneak a win? But you don't want to be losing. That's the be all and end all of it. You cannot lose.
And obviously some of those players are away on international duty, but Paul Ince has got another week to prepare for that. So let's look forward to that one next weekend. But now it's time to speak to Andy Bernal. Andy, you were obviously a teammate of Dylan's at Reading in the 90s. You represented Australia. You were personal manager to David Beckham when Beckham moved to Real Madrid, I think it was. You're also an author, so loads to talk to you about. You've also given us at the start, before we started this call, a bit of an exclusive as well, so hopefully we'll get to speak to you about that. But before we talk to you about David Beckham and your book, can you take us back to when you first joined Reading from Sydney Olympic? I think it was 1994. Firstly, how did that move come about?
It came about in a bar at 1 a.m. in King's Cross, which is like the Soho area of London, or Sydney's equivalent. And I ran into Mick Hickman, who was one of the assistant coaches for Mark McGee at the time. And he said, look, we've just gone up to Div 1, I think it was, Championship. And he said, we're looking for a right back. And I don't think I'd ever played right back in my whole career. I've been a six or a man marker at the back, a central defender. And he said, can you play right back? And I said, tell Mark McGee I can play right back. So within 24 hours, I'd spoken to Mark and I was on my way to Reading. By that stage, I was probably on one leg. I wouldn't have passed a modern day medical, but my desire to get back to England and play after being denied for many reasons over many years was so great that I told Mark I could play right back. And I got on a plane and landed in London, and next minute I was driving down the Oxford Street to see Dr. Williams.
And it was obviously a great time for Reading, for the players, the team, the fans during your time at Reading. Obviously, we had Shaka Hislop on and talked about that game against Bolton in the playoff final. I mean, if you look back on your time at Reading and how that went for you, what are your thoughts now, all these years later, about what's your sort of summary of how you felt about your time at Reading?
It was, for me, it was one of the most amazing parts of my life. Growing up in Australia, as a kid, watching the big match and watching English football and falling in love with the Leeds United side of yesteryear. For kids in Australia, it's a dream to play in England. And for me, just having the opportunity to play in all those wonderful stadiums that you read about in shoot magazines. And we're talking 35, 40 years ago, when going to England, when playing in England, for an Aussie kid was like going to the moon. It was simply kind of that much of a leap. And Craig Johnston was a pioneer for us in that aspect. And just a beautiful, beautiful time with fantastic, people, from club officials to teammates, good people, good souls. I turned up, I was made really, really welcome, and it wasn't as little as a community club, but it had a community spirit about it. And I've heard Dylan talk about that before. We as players really, really engaged with the whole town. There was a fantastic spirit about the place. We were a good side too. You take the first 14, 15, 16 players, we didn't have a lot of depth. But wow, what a wonderful bunch of footballers. And many of us, pros that quite didn't make it elsewhere or whatever, but we came together and there was just a fantastic vibe and feeling that you really get in football, that we would go anywhere and we knew we were going to win, or if we lost, we'd put up a fantastic performance. We were good footballers. We were warriors and athletes, and we played for every single person that paid money to go through those turnstiles. We gave our all. At times that wasn't good enough to, you don't win all your matches, but certainly for a year or two there, it was a wonderful time where you would just go out and play, and then it was almost this sense of knowing that you would win. You'd go to Roker Park, on a Tuesday night, and you'd land at Roker Park and just had this feeling that you'd come away with the 3 points. It was an unbelievable, that first season for me was unbelievable. 9 months earlier, I'd been playing part-time football, while still being an international. I was playing part-time football for Sydney Olympic and working as a park ranger / dog catcher, 9 months earlier. 9 months later, I'm running out at Wembley. It's mad.
Andy, when you came to Reading, obviously, it's a new environment. How did you feel? How did you feel when you first came into that? When we used to train at Coombe Park, and you think, wow, and then obviously it's your first day at training. How did you feel? Knowing that it was your dream to come to England and play football.
What was
your memories?
Look, after I'd been kicked out of, after I'd left Spain because of the military service issue, which that's another story. You can read about that in the book. But I'm one of only 2 Australians that Brian Clough ever signed. So I trialled with Cloughie, and Brian Clough signed me for Nottingham Forest, along with, I was the second after Alan Davidson, an Aussie international back in the 70s or 80s. And so I was Cloughie's second Aussie signing. And, at the time I couldn't dislodge Neil Webb or Des Walker. But Cloughie liked me, but we never talked football. He just wanted to talk about cricket. He loved it. I loved cricket, and asked me about Desmond Haynes and Gordon Greenwich, Viv Richards, the Chappell brothers. He'd bang on about cricket all day. So, but he liked me, and he said, I'm going to get you a club, son. So he got me to Ipswich Town, and that's another story. I made my Ipswich Town debut, and not long after was deported. Mark Bosnich and I being the only Socceroos to ever be deported from Mother England. But then it was 5 years away, and I landed back at Coombe Park, in the company of yourself and many other fantastic guys and players. And I was excited. I was nervous. I knew Reading were back up in the big leagues, and really excited and looking forward to it. And it was like a dream. My dream, was still, attainable. Was attainable, and I just as a kid dreamt of playing on all those beautiful stages, mate. From Elland Road to you name any ground in England.
Yeah.
It was just a beautiful thing, and I turned up, and you guys were fantastic. It's always difficult, going into a new club, but I was around three other new guys: Darius, Simon Osborne, and Paul Holsgrove. So we kind of hung together a bit, but everyone was welcoming. It was a good spirit about the place. I remember Kevin Dillon had a fantastic place down at Coombe Park. I wanted his house. And
yeah, we all did.
Yeah.
We all did.
So
and Kev got out of bed at 10:25.
Yeah, straight down to training, and but it was I just remember it as a very memorable time for football in Reading. For everybody. My first encounter with the chairman, I had dreadlocks, and he thought I was he says, "Are you an Aboriginal? Are you one of those native Aboriginal?" I said, "No, actually, mum and dad are Spanish, mate." He goes, "You look like an Aboriginal."
That's typical, John.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously Ray Ransom was the left back when I signed. Sorry, when the right back when I signed. And like you're saying about signing, Darius, Ozzy, and yourself, them little jigsaw pieces that fit straight away, that you don't have to develop and you don't have to grow into that position. That was the most, for me, as a manager and as a coach, that they found the right players that actually could go into fit the jigsaw puzzle that they were building at the time.
Well, it was very clever from Mark McGee. After I left England, he had some times that were not so good in football, and that happens in management or as a player. But certainly, the year or so that I was under him at Reading, a very empowering, charismatic man who made you feel very. You had wings when you got into that tunnel when you were running out onto the pitch. You had wings. He created a side that had no fear of any side that you played against. I was almost listening to Russell Crowe in Gladiator. As you ran out, he in that respect, he was an empowerer of men. He was, Colin Lee and Mark and Mick Hickman were fantastic coaches. It was pretty simple. I joined a squad of players that were on a high. They'd just gone up from Div 2, was it, Dill? I think. So it was, there was a real buzz about the place. But clever acquisitions, clever purchases. For not a lot of money, probably 30,000-40,000 pounds in total, and wow, we fit straight in. But it was not only as footballers. I believe we fit in to the culture of the club, the whole club philosophy, and we, there was never any Billy Big times at the club. Just I can't put it exactly into words, but just a good bunch of people, from officials, players, fans, and it's a very hard thing to find in football. Times like that, particular years, particular eras. Mate, you asked me before, what I felt about that time in my life. Amazing. Loved the whole experience.
Andy, part of the success of that team, I think, and I don't know if Johnny will agree with me, but you had you on one side, Dylan on the other side, getting forward. And you said that you didn't start off as a right back, but you had that freedom, didn't you? And that was part of, as a fan, that was fantastic to watch. And, Dylan attacking down one side, scoring goals, and you going down the other side. Was that something that helped you really enjoy your time at Reading?
Oh, look, I think that always helps, doesn't it? That you play a beautiful brand of football, and I think that side played a beautiful brand of football. But I don't see what they're playing much these days. I'm a little far away and don't watch all the matches. But it was a kind of simple brand of football that sometimes over the years we've gone away from. It's the message was vertical first. If you can hit Quinny, if you can hit someone up front, and then support and get wide and get crosses in, and at times we've especially, I don't know about Reading, but here in Australia we overpass, we overkill it with passing and possession and this and that, and it was so simple. Get it to a free man up front and support and get round him and overlap and I remember Dylan and myself, you get out of your feet and whip it into dangerous areas. It's pretty simple, and have people then that get in there and are fearless and put the head in and support and win your battles in midfield, win your second balls. Real simple information given to motivated players that were all good athletes, and you're hard to beat that way. You're hard to beat, and you're going to trouble people.
Johnny, have you got a question from a fan's perspective from that time?
I just think, Andy, you're one of those players that put 100% in every time you played for us. And when we went from Elm Park to Madejski, how was that for you? Then going to play under Tommy Burns and that whole transition.
Well, yeah, Tommy. What can you say about Tommy? Legend of Celtic, but he, I was one of the players that he wanted to get rid of, and to be fair to him, my knee was coming to its end, and so I wasn't one of Tommy's favourite players as such, or one that he wanted to make admin his plans going forward. But the transition was. He had told me not long before. I remember we had a meeting in the stands at Elm Park, and he said, "Look, I'd like to give you a payout, son, and you won't be featuring in my teams going forward, and we're moving to the Madejski Stadium." And I said, "Well, I'd like to stick around, Gaffer. So I'll try my best to change your mind." And I'm not sure if it was a few months later or something like that, but I was lucky enough to play in the first game ever at the Madejski Stadium.
Yeah.
And Tommy Burns was on the bench. He was the manager, so I changed his mind a little there. But he came in, and it was a funny time. He brought in, I think the first week or so, there was a minibus turned up with about 8 players that Tommy had brought in, and they all through his agent. So it wasn't looking good for a lot of us. But that's football. That's football. You get new managers in, and Tommy had his methods, his systems. Ultimately, as a manager, you live and you die by those decisions and performances. And he went like other managers went.
Yeah.
But that look, for me, Johnny, when we talk about Elm Park, again, one of those iconic stadiums that as a kid in Australia you dream about playing in. A really fan-friendly stadium. But then moving to Madejski was a beautiful thing too. Then had a different feel, but a beautiful feel in its own way. Just lucky to play in both. And there's not many players, I suppose, in Reading history that can say they played in both.
Yeah.
Andy, how did talk about the role with David Beckham. So you were, I think your title was personal manager. You get, I expect you hear a lot personal assistant, and you don't. It's not. It kind of comes up the wrong image, doesn't it? But how did that come about?
Well, I was everything. I joined Sue Roberts at Reading. Had actually got me an interview with David Beckham's agent, Tony Stevens, after I finished at Reading, and I got on a train and walked into an office in Mayfair, London, and met Tony. And Sue said, if you get 5 minutes with him, he's a very busy man. If you get 5 minutes, you'll have done really well, Andy. And I called it about an hour and a half later, and I said, Sue, Tony's making me a coffee. I think I'm going all right. And she said, all right. And it went from there. And he said, Tony's test was they were trying to get Tim Cahill at the time. They were trying to sign Timmy Cahill, the Aussie kid, and they couldn't get him. And he said, well, this is going to be your test, Andy. I'm going to give you 3 months to get Tim Cahill. So 24 hours later, I walked through into the Mayfair office with Tim Cahill and Lucas Neal. Tim signed for us, Lucas didn't. That's another story. You can read about that one in the book, but that's how it became major. And then part of my role was working out of the Sydney office and London office and creating relationships and building relationships with all the teams on the continent in Europe. So I would spend months at times visiting Real Madrid, Barcelona, Atletico Madrid, all the Spanish sides, then onto Italy, into Milan, AC Milan, Juve, the whole lot. So we'd build up a network of relationships with all those sides. And, the David Beckham move was a year in the making. I'd spoken to Valdano and Butragueño in Madrid over a year. So when Fergie decided to kick the boot into Beckham's face, it was pretty much everything was in place for us to move David. And in the book, there's a chapter on that where, I go into Barcelona and we're discussing possibilities there. But David's mind was always on signing for Real Madrid. He wanted to play alongside Zidane, Ronaldo Nazario, Roberto Carlos, Raul, Figo. So, the fact that I was there, David felt very comfortable with me, as his right-hand man. You call it whatever you want. It was right-hand man, it was driver, it was bodyguard, it was the whole lot. It's the insanity of that role at that particular time in my life has impacted me in many ways, at times positive, sometimes negatively, but I wouldn't swap it. I wouldn't swap it for anything. I formed great relationships and friendships with all those Galacticos, just the greatest of the greatest in football. Being with David allowed me many opportunities to do and see things that I would never have experienced before in my life. And it was as simple as, I'd played in England, I'd played in Spain. I'm the first Socceroo, first Australian to ever play in Spain, which is a fantastic achievement. And on the back of that, I speak fluent Spanish, Italian and Portuguese. So as I write in the book, and David and me had a friend, had many roles, and we were comfortable in that, but you can't control a period in football time in an era where paparazzi were stalking people like Princess Diana, and we were stalked as well. And that's for many chapters in the book. But if Princess Diana was stalked and followed and pursued, then to the extreme, then David and Victoria were up there. So just crazy. You couldn't go anywhere. We'd be followed by 100 people every day on motorbikes, in cars, cameras everywhere. The hotel, the houses would be surrounded. I'm waking up, I'm going next door, grabbing David out of bed. We're off to training, and I'm surrounded by 2 SAS commandos and 2 ex, Fidel Castro, spies who are part of our team. It's, sometimes you'd have to pinch yourself, and just madness. You'd ring up Porsche and they just say, oh, "Hi, it's Andy. I'm with David Beckham. Do you think we could have a car?" And yeah, what colour do you want? And I'd go to Porsche and I'd pick up a car, and I wouldn't sign anything. They'd just give me some keys, and off I drive in a brand new Porsche.
So tell us, you mentioned your book, and obviously, David Beckham's a part of that, and that chapter, if you like, is called Riding Shotgun. So what's the book about? Is it about your life, or is it a particular, theme or topic?
No, the book is an autobiography. It's a book about a kid that was born in Australia to Spanish immigrants, who became the first Australian to Socceroo to go back and sign for a La Liga club in Spain, which is a really big achievement looking back, and coming on the back of your mum and dad come out on a ship in 1961, and their son goes and becomes the first Australian to go and play in Spain and sign for a Spanish club. It's a big achievement. I wasn't the greatest footballer, I wasn't the worst, but it's a nice achievement. And the book details, that process. Playing football and rugby league and cricket, in Australia as a kid, and then going on and living my dreams of playing, football in England. And I go through parts where I mention all the wonderful stories and journeys in the UK, and then after football, with Beckham, and then after, life with Beckham, where I got myself into a little trouble. And, I'm not proud of a certain time in my life where I was addicted to cocaine and crack cocaine, but I'm very proud that I got off it, and I'm very proud that I'm here and to tell the story and hopefully, empower young footballers, girls, boys, to try and stay on the right path, and continue and be resilient in life. So, and for me, there were certain parts after football, because I didn't divulge information on David Beckham and Victoria Beckham, that the press came after me. Some of those newspapers in England now don't exist. They don't exist because they hacked us, they spied on us. I was offered probably 16, 17 years ago around $2 million US to divulge information on David and Victoria, and I refused. And I got myself into trouble in Reading, and they said, this is a nothing story, but if you don't sell out, if you don't do this, if you don't do that, we'll ruin your life.
You are kidding. No, hang on, whoa. Let me go back there, because I want to. Your book's in my house, waiting to be read when I get back to England, Andy. I've already ordered it. It got good, so I can't wait to read it, because I would have never ever imagined you taking cocaine. You might crack cocaine. I mean, you couldn't even drink. So I mean, you used to come out with us.
That's the best thing you've ever said.
Tuesday, Utopia. You were the last to the bar and first to leave. So, but no, I never knew that, Andy. I never knew that, and I tell you what, I'm so glad I'm talking to you now. That must take some guts to tell that story. And now you've just revealed that the press wanted to ruin your life for you to give another story. I mean, listen, I take my hat off to you, pal. That's why it's always
appreciate that. And Andy, we said, I mentioned earlier, a little exclusive you've given us. You're embarking on another project, aren't you? I think you said you're about to acquire an A-League club. Is that right, in Australia?
Yep. A business partner of mine is we're in the final process now of acquiring an A-League club in Australia. For everyone in England that may not be aware of the A-League, it's probably like acquiring a major league soccer club around that kind of level or standard. So, I'm looking to get back into football via that way. It's been a long time coming, that's kind of the new Andy going forward. And thanks for your kind words, Dylan. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that people have no idea. In my book, I've called out UK police, I've called UK courts out, and everyone is silent.
So your book's, Andy, your book's called Riding Shotgun. It's out now, is it? It's out now.
It's out on Amazon, and I've just finished the recording of the audiobook.
Absolutely brilliant, Andy.
So there you go.
So Andy, look, a pleasure to. We always seem to run out of time. It goes so quickly, especially when we got such a brilliant guest as you, Andy. So thanks ever so much for your time. Great pleasure to have you on, and for getting up really early in the morning for us as well.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Any time.
Love listening to you, Andy. You're really good, mate. You're such an inspirational story. You really do.
Yeah, we'd love to get you back on again at some point, Andy, if you'd like to.
Anytime you want, guys, just hook it up. And as
Definitely.
Dylan used to say, Andy loves a shandy.
Thanks